He's gone through every horrible thing you can imagine. And yet he's continued with Christ. And oftentimes our Christian walk will look like that, won't it? It will look like problem after problem. It will look like difficulties and struggles and joys and good times and blessings. It will often look like that because we are in the world, but not of the world. We're different from the world, and the world does not know us. The world does not accept us, and we have an enemy out there. Now, Satan is not worried about, people who don't believe in him. He's already got them. He's keeping them, but his number one enemy are Christians. To attack Christians, tear Christians down, cause problems for Christians, tempt Christians into sin. Why? So that he can stop us. We're his enemy. We're in a war. This is a battle. Every Sunday at dinner church, it's a battle. It's a battle. We're fighting by being here. We're fighting by listening to the word and embracing it, and not only listening, but taking what we're hearing and putting it into practice. That's huge. If it's just in one ear and out the other, that's not going to work. We need to be putting into practice what we're learning at church, at dinner church, and in our own time, studying the Bible every day, reading that word, praying, talking to God about things, fellowshipping with other believers, sharing the gospel. That's what it's all about. And that is the way. That's the way home. So if you recall last week, Paul gave his defense before King Agrippa, right? He gives this brilliant defense. He shares his testimony is really what he does. And King Agrippa, his response was, Paul, you think you're going to make me a Christian that easily? Just after one hearing, you think you're going to convert me to be a Christ follower? And Paul is like, look, I want all of you to be Christ followers. I want you to all be like I am, he said, except for the chains. I don't want you to have the chains on, but everything else, it's all good. So now Paul, he's not been found guilty. Basically, they say, well, he appealed to sort of the Supreme Court, you might say. He's appealed to Caesar. So on to Caesar he goes. So the next chapter, 27, is Paul sailing for Rome. And boy, if you know the book of Acts, you know Paul's about to have some problems, right? If you know what happens in Acts 27, it's pretty wild. So, and when you're on a ship at sea, things can get wild, right? You ever heard of the Titanic? It gets a little wild out there sometimes. But here's what happened. It says, when it was decided that we would sail for Italy, here's another thing. It starts into the we stuff again. The we stuff. It says, when it was decided that we would sail for Italy, that's not how most of Acts is written, but what that means is Luke was with them at this point. The writer of the book of Acts was literally on the boat with Paul. That's why he's saying we, because he's saying I was there too. And there's a few times near the end of Acts where Luke will start saying we. That means Luke was with them. Kind of cool. It says, when it was decided that we would sail for Italy, Paul and some other prisoners were handed over to a centurion named Julius, who belonged to the imperial regiment. We boarded a ship from Adramyttium, about to sail for ports along the coast of the province of Asia, and we put out to sea. So they're on the boat, and they're out to sea. It says, Aristarchus, the Macedonian from Thessalonica, was with us. The next day we landed at Sidon, and Julius, in kindness to Paul, allowed him to go to his friends so they might provide for his needs. See, whenever you're in jail, you're kind of reliant on your friends to send what you need. Like, if you're in jail, you're probably on the phone pleading with your parents to put money into your account there so you can buy stuff in what they call the canteen. Why do I know this? Don't ask. But yes, you're pleading with people on the outside to put money into your canteen account so you can order stuff so that you have more than the jail rations. So they stop at this port in Sidon, and the Christians there are helping Paul with his needs. It says, from there we put out to sea again and passed to the lee of Cyprus because the winds were against us. This is during the time of sailing ships. So if the winds were blowing against you in the way you didn't want to go, you're kind of in trouble. You had to just kind of wait until you got better seas and better wind. And anyone here ever worked on a ship or been on a ship before? So, yeah. Anyone here in the Navy at all? No? Okay. Yeah, I've never really been on ships that much, but it's always kind of fascinated me. I remember I was in rehab once with a guy who was on a ship that would be fishing up near Alaska, and he'd go all over sort of the northern part up there, up near Alaska, and I saw the northern lights and stuff. Pretty cool. But so they're sailing at sea, the wind's against them. It says when we had sailed across the open sea off the coast of Cilicia and Pamphylia, we landed at Myra in Lycia. So he's listing all these ports that they stopped at along the way to Rome. It says there the centurion found an Alexandrian ship sailing for Italy and put us on board. We made slow headway for many days and had difficulty arriving off Cnidus. When the wind did not allow us to hold our course, we sailed to believe Crete, opposite Salmone. We moved along the coast with difficulty and came to a place called Fair Havens near the town of Lasea. Much time had been lost, and sailing had already become dangerous because by now it was after the Day of Atonement. So Paul warned them, "Men, I can see that our voyage is going to be disastrous and bring great loss to ship and cargo into our own lives also." So Paul is telling them, I've been talking to the Lord about our little trip here, and there's an issue here. We need to pause for a second, okay? Have you guys ever had a bad feeling about something? You're like, I just need to not go there tonight. Oh yeah. I'm sure all of us have had that. We have just a funny feeling about the place or the person, or, maybe it's just we have a funny feeling like I shouldn't be on the roads right now. And a lot of times that's God protecting us from some sort of issue, some sort of calamity, maybe a car accident or someone who would, hurt us or something. I'm not sure, but yeah. We'll listen to that voice. Often it's the Holy Spirit speaking to us. So, Paul's telling them, there's an issue here, but the centurion instead listened to what Paul said, followed the advice of the pilot and the owner of the ship. Since the harbor was unsuitable to winter in, the majority decided that we should sail on, hoping to reach Phoenix and winter there. This was a harbor in Crete facing both southwest and northwest. It says, when a gentle south wind began to blow, they saw their opportunity. So they weighed anchor and sailed along the shore of Crete. Before very long, a wind of hurricane force called the northeaster swept down from the island. The ship was caught by the storm and could not head into the wind, so we gave way to it and were driven along. As we passed to the lee of a small island called Cauda, we were hardly able to make the lifeboat secure, so the men hoisted it aboard. So a storm is hitting them, and they're at first they try to tack into it. You understand the idea of tacking? Tacking is where the wind is directly flying at you, so you tack into it by pointing straight toward it. So they try to tack into the wind to kind of hold their position, but instead they're blown south, and they're just taken by the wind. And at one point, even one of their little rescue boats is like becoming unstable. So, excuse me. So the ship was caught by the storm. So the men hoisted aboard this escape raft. Then they passed ropes under the ship itself to hold it together. Because they were afraid it would run aground in the sandbars of Syrtis, they lowered the sea anchor and let the ship be driven along. We took such a violent battering from the storm that the next day they began to throw the cargo overboard. So they're getting just whipped to pieces by the storm. They tied ropes around the ship to hold it together. And now they're so worried they're throwing stuff overboard. Very dangerous situation. And who warned them ahead of time? Paul did. Said something, we need to just pause here for a second. They didn't listen, and now they're in trouble. On the third day, so this has been going on for 3 days, they threw the ship's tackle overboard with their own hands. When neither sun nor stars appeared for many days, and the storm continued raging, we finally gave up all hope of being saved. Wow. Think about that. They gave up all hope of ever escaping the storm. You ever been there in life? Where you're just like, I can't do it. It's too much for me. I'm not going to make it, and I'm renouncing hope in this situation. Ever been there? I've been there. It's a very bad place to be. It is one of the lowest places a human can be when you give up all hope. But it happens, right? And if it ever happened to you, thanks be to God that Jesus Christ has brought you here, because this is where you belong, right? This is where you belong. After they had gone a long time without food, so now they're starving too, Paul stood up before them and said, "Men, you should have taken my..." Oh gosh, did he just do that? He did it. He's like, "I told you so." He did. Look, it's right here. He says, "Men, you should have taken my advice not to sail from Crete." All right, well, you earned it. Then you would have spared yourselves this damage and loss. I'm not going to say it. But now I urge you to keep up your courage, because not one of you will be lost. So Paul is saying, and he's prophesying according to God, he's saying not one person is going to get lost, but the ship will be destroyed. That's kind of depressing, but it's good that no one's going to get hurt. Okay. Last night, an angel of the God to whom I belong and whom I serve stood beside me and said, "Do not be afraid, Paul. You must stand trial before Caesar." That's interesting. So that would confirm that Paul did eventually end up before Caesar, because God is saying it. You know, a lot of us speculate, did Paul ever really speak before Caesar himself? That verse right there says, yes, he did, because God is saying you will do that. It says, "You must stand trial before Caesar, and God has graciously given you the lives of all those who sail with you. So keep up your courage, men, for I have faith in God that it will happen just as he told me. Nevertheless, we must run aground on some island." Man, I could preach a whole sermon just on those 2 verses right there. So keep up your courage, for I have faith in God that it will happen just as he told me. Has God told you something, some promise that he's given you that you're waiting on? You can trust him completely that he will fulfill it. And your part is to have faith, to have trust, to have a rock-solid faith, trust in God that it will be done according to his promise. But you do need to understand verse 26. "Nevertheless, we must run aground on some island." Like, it's going to be a journey, you know? There's going to be some rocky parts. We're going to have to end up on this jungle island, and we're going to go through some stuff there, and it's going to be a rocky road, you know? But understand it will happen. It says, "On the 14th night, we were still being driven across the Adriatic Sea when about midnight the sailors sensed they were approaching land. They took soundings and found that the water was 120 feet deep. A short time later, they took soundings again and found it was only 90 feet deep. Fearing that we would be dashed against the rocks, they dropped 4 anchors from the stern and prayed for daylight. In an attempt to escape from the ship, the sailors let the lifeboat down into the sea, pretending they were going to lower some anchors from the bow. Then Paul said to the centurion and the soldiers, 'Unless these men stay with the ship, you cannot be saved.' So the soldiers cut the ropes that held the lifeboat and let it drift away." So Paul was saying, don't try to sneak off and escape on the lifeboat. Stick with us, and the Lord is going to keep you safe. Just before dawn, Paul urged them all to eat. "For the last 14 days, he said, you have been in constant suspense and have gone without food. You haven't eaten anything. Now I urge you to take some food. You need it to survive. Not one of you will lose a single hair from your head." After he said this, he took some bread and gave thanks to God in front of them all. Then he broke it and began to eat. They were all encouraged and ate some food themselves. although there were 276 of us on board, wow, that's a big ship, 276 people. When they had eaten as much as they wanted, they lightened the ship by throwing the grain into the sea. Amazing. So Paul is the calm one in this situation because he's heard from God. And he's able to kind of witness to the crew and to the ship saying, everything's going to be all right. And have something to eat. It's going to be okay. Then it says, when daylight came, they did not recognize the land. But they saw a bay with a sandy beach where they decided to run the ship aground if they could. Cutting loose the anchors, they left them in the sea and at the same time untied the ropes that held the rudders. Then they hoisted the foresail to the wind and made for the beach. But the ship struck a sandbar and ran aground. The bow stuck fast and would not move, and the stern was broken to pieces by the pounding of the surf. The soldiers planned to kill the prisoners to prevent any of them from swimming away and escaping. Oh man, come on. You make it all this way to safety, and now the ship is breaking apart on this sandbar. It's kind of falling to pieces and breaking up by the waves hitting it. So the soldiers say, well, let's kill the prisoners, otherwise they're going to escape. And thankfully it didn't end that way. It says, but the centurion wanted to spare Paul's life and kept them from carrying out their plans. So this lead soldier guy kind of says, no, we're not doing that. He ordered those who could swim to jump overboard first and get to land. The rest were to get there on planks or on other pieces of the ship. In this way, everyone reached land safely. God gave the promise, God fulfilled the promise. And that is as simple as it gets. He is faithful, we can believe him, we can trust in God, even if we don't understand, even if we're struggling, his promises are true, and Jesus Christ is a real Savior that can always help us in times of trouble.